Welcome into episode 7, I believe, of the PrintFest DFS podcast. I'm your host, Justin Rowe, alongside Scott Bandy, and we're going to be breaking down the Week 9 slate on Draftkings. It's an interesting one where there's not a lot of value down low, and there's a lot of really high-priced receivers and running backs and quarterbacks that we really want to get into our lineup. So it's really going to be interesting in cash to see how we can jam in these guys. We might have to punt off tight end like we always love to do, um, but we're going to walk our way through this slate. So starting at quarterback, I think you might have to punt off quarterback this week if you really want to get in two of these high priced wide receivers, and we'll break down all of them. And I think to punt it off, I think we're going to have to go with Drew Lock. And it's not my favorite play. I mean, he's not a great player, but he does push the ball downfield, and that's something that's really important. His average depth of target over the last 4 games is 10.7. That leads this league. So he's just dropping back and just slinging it. He's only averaged 13.8 points per game over the last 4, so it's not great. He's on the road, but at least he's in a dome. He doesn't worry about any kind of weather or anything like that. And he's against Atlanta. I mean, 8.6 yards per attempt, 28 fantasy points per game, 29 DVOA. They get no pressure on opposing quarterbacks. It's a fast-paced game. He's 5,200. And Atlanta's allowed the last 6 quarterbacks that they face go over 300 yards. So I think that if you need to punt it off, I think Drew Lock for that game environment, they're going to be trailing. Their implied total is 23 and a quarter, so not terrible. But I think Drew Lock is fine if you need to punt it off at quarterback.
I mean, this is what we like to do, right? We like to target the piss poor Falcons defense, right? So, believe it or not, the Falcons have actually gotten a little bit better against quarterbacks over the last 4 weeks. But that being, even with that improvement, they're still dead last in fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks, slightly edging out the Seahawks, if you can believe that. So, I mean, at that price point in the projected game environment, I mean, I think he's, like you said, you have to find value somewhere on this slate. All the chalks is up top, and I think there's a couple other quarterbacks we're going to talk about in a minute that I think are going to see a little bit of ownership. But those low price guys, I think most people are going to kind of gravitate to Drew Lock. I mean, I still see. I'm a little bit unsure about him just because I don't know if I haven't decided for myself if I think he's good or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I mean, at the end of the day, it's the Falcons. So at 5,300, I think you're not really going to find better value there. So and I think quarterback, there's never really a lot of chalk at quarterback, right? So I don't really think the opportunity cost is that high. I mean, even guys like Josh Allen or Lamar on Mahomes, what is their ownership going to get on a good week? 15% maybe.
Yeah.
So I think he's fine. Moving on to my favorite quarterback play in the week is Josh Allen at 7K. So again, if you're going to pay up for Josh Allen at this price point, you're going to have to find value elsewhere. And as you'll see, we're going to talk about a lot of high price guys, and you're really just going to have to make these lineups fit as you can. It's a really tough week pricing wise. But just starting out with Josh Allen, there's a 55 over under, 26 implied team total. Seattle is allowing the second most points per game to quarterbacks at 25.4 points. And here's the thing. I know Josh Allen has not been very good over the last month, but this matchup is just the spot of spots. Teams average about 46.8 attempts per game against the Seattle defense and 358 passing yards, which are both most in the NFL. Bills average 35 pass attempts a game at 203 yards. So just the pace in that game, they're going to be forced to keep up because Russell's going to cook. He's going to show up with Metcalf and Lockett. He's going to put up his points. And I think this is a game where Josh Allen's going to be forced to move the ball down the field. In addition to that, the Seahawks have given up 4 rushing touchdowns to quarterbacks, which is tied for the most in the NFL. And we know that Josh Allen calls his own number around the goal line more than anyone else in the league, possibly not named Cam Newton. And the last 2 games, he's actually ran a little bit more than he had early on this season. He's had 10, 11 attempts both the last 2 weeks. And I think if they're down and trying to come back in this game, I think you might see him scrambling a little bit more, even though Seattle isn't all that good at rushing the passer. They did bring in Carlos Dunlap. I'm not sure if he's actually going to play this week or not, but I think that I'm just expecting a game script where Josh Allen is down most of the time. He's going to have to be clawing back to keep up with Russ. So I think this game environment sets up for an absolute explosion, maybe 35 to 40 points. And obviously, if he hits that, I think it might be tough to keep up if we don't play him. If you do pay down for someone like Locke, you're going to have to find. I mean, it's not guaranteed he's going to explode, but I do think Josh Allen has a floor of 20 in this spot. I just don't see a way that he busts. I really don't. What's your take on this?
Yeah, they're going to have to be throwing all game. And to your point that he's rushing more, yeah, he's averaged 36 rushing yards per game over his last four, which is fourth on this slate behind Kyler Murray. Russell Wilson's even been running the ball a lot more. Lamar Jackson. So yeah, I mean his rushing floor is definitely there. He's 7K, so he's priced up a bit. But for this matchup here with Seattle, I think Josh Allen has to be a priority this week. Like we talked about earlier, it's just really going to be tough to get him in there. But I do love him this week, though.
Yeah, and then the other quarterback I like, same price range as Justin Herbert at 6,800. I think he's also fine for cash, and it gives you a little bit of off the chalk. I think Herbert's going to be owned, but not the way Josh Allen is because it's such an elite spot. But Justin Herbert at 6,800, over under 51.5, 26.5 implied total for the team. This is personally my favorite game on the slate. I think the over's a near lock. I think 51.5 is just too low. These are two really bad defenses and two teams that have been pretty good at putting up points the last few weeks. The Raiders 31st DVOA, 27th DVOA against the pass. They're giving up the fourth most points to quarterbacks the last 4 weeks, almost 25 points a game. And to correlate with that, the Chargers have been pretty bad against quarterbacks too. They're giving up the sixth most points to quarterbacks, and they just traded away Desmond King.
Mm-hmm.
So you had a defense that was already beat up without Derwin James, without Bosa, or not Bosa, Ingram. And now you're losing another key piece in Desmond King. I think that the Raiders should be able to keep up in this spot. So far, Herbert's hit the 300-yard bonus in 3 of 6 games this year. He's running a little bit as well. I think he's getting you 15, 20 yards a game, which is a little bit of a boost to his floor. But I think I said this last week, Herbert's really shocked me with how good he's looked early on. I wasn't really a big Justin Herbert fan coming out of the draft. I thought he had a lot of decision-making issues with throwing touch passes and whatnot. But I mean, it's hard not to like him in this spot. I mean, he's just getting it done week in, week out. It's a projected shootout. So I like him to get off a little bit of the chalk with Josh Allen.
Yeah, and he's a home favorite. It should be a faster-paced game. And he's just been crushing. 29 Draftkings points per game over his last 4 is ridiculous. And he's pushing the ball downfield, 9.4 ADOT over the last 4 games. It's just he's been awesome. I mean, the Raiders get basically no pressure, so he's in a really good spot. It's just he's priced up a bit. He's right in that range of Deshaun Watson and Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. So he might kind of get lost in the shuffle here on this slate. But he's really solid, though.
Yeah, I mean, to make matters worse, I know Jonathan Abram's been out this week with some kind of illness.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard anything about whether it's COVID related or not. And obviously, you don't really care too much about that, but he's definitely one of the best secondary pieces they've got. I think Maurice Hurst has been hurt this week. So, I mean, if we see a couple of these guys sit on an already porous defense, I mean, it's just going to make it that much more juicy.
Yeah. Yeah, and Derek Carr on the other side is also perfectly fine at 5,700. He's actually been running the ball a little bit, 20 rushing yards per game over his last 4, 7.9 yards per pass attempt. I mean, Derek Carr has been just fine, 5,700 in this matchup, and it's going to be a faster paced game with a high enough total. I think if you have the salary to get up from Drew Lock to get up to Derek Carr, I think he's a fine middle of the road play, kind of priced right in between Herbert and Drew Lock.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's perfectly fine. I really especially like him for GPPs this week. I think all the game log watchers are going to see that game last week, and I think they might get off him a little bit. But Derek Carr's been really good this year. He's always been very efficient, but now he's got a little bit more weaponry.
Mhm.
Uh, Another year under John Gruden, I really think he's he's having one of the best seasons he's had in a while. He's kind of one of those guys who's just like like when I think of like that general mediocre league average quarterback, I think of Derek Carr, which might be a little bit disrespectful, but he's been good this year. So I absolutely love him in GPPs and cash. I think he's fine. Again, we have to find the value somewhere.
Yep. Yeah, so moving on to running back where we kind of have to pay up. I think he's just locking Dalvin Cook this week. He's playing against Detroit. He's at home, 28 implied total. They're 4-point favorites. He's been crushing. Yeah, I mean, he went off for 50 burger last week. That's not why we're playing him. But we would have played him if he scored 20 last week. I don't care that he scored 4 touchdowns. That doesn't matter to me at all. In fact, it probably hurts a little bit because he's going to be so much more high owned. Um, but the Vikings, they want to lean on the run. On over the last 5 weeks on early downs in the first half of games, they run the ball 56% of the time. That's easily the highest in the league. This is a team who wants to run the ball first, and he's been absolutely crushing. He gets the goal line. He's averaged 4 targets per game over his last 4. He's not hurt anymore. He's fully off the injury report, ready to go. Um, and Vikings home games, they've actually averaged 67 points per game. That's second most in the league. So this could be a shootout if Matt Stafford is there. And if Matt Stafford's not there, well, then Minnesota's going to be up by that much more and just going to be running every play seemingly. So I think Dalvin Cook at 8,200, I think you just play him. He's the best running back play on the slate by far.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he's just an absolute lock. It's another one of these high price guys that we kind of just have to play. He is, I mean, outside of Aaron Jones, the highest upside at the running back position week in, week out. And I think you could argue that his upside is just as high. I actually think it suits up better for him that Stafford is dealing with COVID. The Lions aren't going to really be able to put up a fight. So it should just equal an increased opportunity for Cook this week. Hopefully, they don't get up too big and sit him down and get Alexander Madison involved. But at the same time, Dalvin Cook's going to be so highly owned in double ups and 50-50s that I don't even think it's going to make a difference. The only thing I'm interested in here is how many people are going to play Christian McCaffrey over Dalvin Cook. And honestly, I don't know, but I know he's back at a similar price point, and it's CMC. I think he's going to have ownership, especially in a game where the Panthers are going to have to put up points to stay to keep up with the Chiefs. Mm-hmm. I'm personally not playing CMC this week off an injury, first week back. Don't know how much they're going to play Mike Davis. I don't really think Mike Davis is going to be involved. I think that's just coach speak. So I much prefer Cook, but I do think it'll be interesting to watch and see where the ownership ends up.
Yeah, I mean, McCaffrey's always going to have ownership, but I think with basically no value on this slate, I don't think McCaffrey's going to be more than 10% or so.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think Cook is the correct process decision, and I'm expecting him to be, 60-70% owned in double ups probably.
Yeah.
And the transition, another guy I think is going to be pretty highly owned this week is Chase Edmonds at 6,800. First week out without Kenyon Drake. Chase Edmonds has been far and away the best back in this backfield all year, and now he's finally going to get unleashed. Miami's giving up the 7th most points to running backs, 26 points a game. But the thing about them is I think that the run defense is actually kind of fluky. I think it's actually probably worse than the stats show. They think about it. They blew out the Niners a couple weeks ago. The Niners didn't run the ball that much, but when they did, they were efficient. Mm-hmm. Raheem Mostert had like 11 carries for 90 yards. The Jets suck, so that game can be scratched. The Rams, I mean, that's a committee-based backfield, and they're not very good they're very good at running the ball either. So, I mean, that's the last 3 games that Miami's played where they've played teams that either haven't been in a good game script to run the ball or just don't run the ball. And I think when you see that and they're still giving up the seventh most points to running backs, I think this sets up really well for Chase Edmonds. He's seen 6 or more targets in 3 of his last 4 games. That's a 13.5% target share, which would be 8th amongst running backs. And you have to remember, he's been playing behind Drake this year. So now we get in a game where he projects somewhere between 18 and 20 touches, in my opinion. I think you can project him for probably 6 targets with upside for more, depending on how this game goes. It would be great if Tua and that Miami offense could put up a fight. I'm not really sure they're going to be able to, though. The Cardinals defense has been pretty solid, but if we get 18 to 20 touches from Edmonds at 6,800 and the efficiency keeps up from what we've seen him doing all year, I think he's in a great spot. I think he's going to be really highly owned as well, probably 60, 70% owned in double ups.
Yeah, I think the only running back behind him, according to Cliff Kingsbury, is DJ Foster. They're not ready to put Benjamin on the field yet. Their rookie running back, 7th round pick. So DJ Foster, this guy is a nobody. Chase Edmonds is going to probably get 20 plus touches. He's going to get the goal line. Even behind Kenny Drake, he still had 5 targets per game over his last 4, and he's averaged 89 yards from scrimmage over his last 4 games as a backup. That's more than James Conner. That's more than CEH, James Robinson, Todd Gurley. Like his production has been starter worthy, and he's only played 48% of the snaps. Now he's going to be playing probably 85+% of the snaps at 6,800. At home, 26.5 implied total. All the reasons that you stated with how bad Miami's run defense is. I think Chase Edmonds is a total smash. You play him and Dalvin Cook, and then it comes down to your RB3 position, what you want to do in flex.
Yeah, I agree. I think people are either going to pay down at that RB3 position and pay up for a higher price receiver, or they're going to lock in another one of those high price running backs and punt receiver a little bit.
Yeah. So the other running back spot that you could fill it with is James Conner. And, James Conner, we had issues with him with him getting hurt mid-game and stuff. But, I mean, over the last month or 2, I mean, he's been perfectly fine. Has not been hurt at all. So he's played 68% of the snaps over his last 4. He's averaged 20 touches per game. That's really solid. 2 opportunities inside the 10 per game. That's perfectly fine. So he's getting stuff. He's getting the money touches at the goal line, and he's taken on a defense in Dallas that we know is just absolutely terrible. They go up 5 yards per carry, 29th DVOA against the run. There's only a couple really things you can poke holes in Conner with is that he's 6,900, so he's a little expensive. He's 100 more than Chase Edmonds, and we're trying getting these high-priced wide receivers in there, and they're 14-point favorites, which normally we would like that for running backs, but they might blow the Cowboys out so bad they might score a couple of defensive touchdowns, like we saw with the Chiefs against the Jets, that where they don't even have a chance to really do much. So I think James Conner, I think he has a really nice floor in this game, and he's had a nice floor all year. But I struggle with what his ceiling could be in this game. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what his ceiling could be. He could break the slate. Maybe he scores 3 touchdowns as their 14-point favorites, or maybe their defense scores a couple touchdowns, and then you're just sitting there with like 15 points. Like, okay, that's fine, but I could add so much more.
The concern for me here is that if there's anything I'm sure of this week, it's that Pittsburgh is going to blow out Dallas. I would not be surprised if they pitched a shutout in this spot. I mean, talking about maybe Cooper Rush playing quarterback for the Cowboys or this Gilbert cat. I mean, against probably what I would say would be the league's best defense. So I think the concern is what happens when the Steelers get up 3 or 4 scores. Are they going to keep Conner out there, or are they going to bring in Benny Snell for the last quarter and a half or so? So, and I mean that's hard to know, right? And if the Cowboys can put up any kind of a fight, that'd be great. But I mean, the spot for Conner is amazing. He's been really good this year. He's staying healthy, knock on wood. So I think he's fine for the price. It's just how much is he going to be out there when they get up? Because I mean, Dallas is going to get blown out. It's just going to happen.
Yeah.
So let's move on to low price running back. And I think at this price range, he's the best play, and that's Justin Jackson at 4,900. Now there's a little bit of uncertainty here. Tremaine Pope is dealing with concussion issues. He may or may not play. If he doesn't play, I think he sets up a lot better in this spot. So that's definitely something to monitor. Now the Raiders are giving up the fifth most points to running backs, a little bit over 29 points per game. But it's funny, they've actually seen the fourth fewest carries against them. So that just tells you how much they're getting crushed on a per touch basis.
Mm-hmm.
They're allowing the third most targets to running backs this season.
That's
and that sets up real well for Justin Jackson, who's had a 14.8% target share the last month. That's very good. He's had 5 or more targets the last 3 games. The Raiders have allowed 8 touchdowns this year to running backs, a tie for 4th most in the league. Now, the uncertainty here is what's the running back distribution with their touches? I mean, the last 3 games, Justin Jackson's seen 15, 5, and 17 carries. Josh Kelly's getting all a goal line. And last week we saw a little bit of a hot hand approach with Pope, but if he doesn't play, then it's likely just going to be Jackson and Kelly. So, I mean, but that's the risk you take at a $4,900 price tag, right? Are you willing to go there for that discount in a game where I would probably project him for about 15 touches, obviously with upside for more, especially if this game shoots out. What would be great for Jackson in this spot is if the Raiders can get out to an early lead and keep that lead, and the Chargers have to dump off, they throw more. Keep Josh Kelly off the field. So it's just, how you feel about him at the price. I like him. We had talked earlier about this. You had said that you like him a lot more if Pope sits. I agree. So, but my approach this week, I think, is going to be locking in Edmonds and Cook. And I really like the high price receiver. High price receivers on this slate a lot more than the low price receivers. So I think I feel better about playing a guy like Jackson, a cheaper third running back, and getting 2 of those higher price receivers that we'll talk about in a minute. I just like that lineup construction a little bit more for this week, as there really isn't too much to like at running back outside of these couple guys. So I think Jackson's fine at the price, but it's definitely something to monitor with Pope.
Yeah, the only thing about Jackson is that he has no touches inside the 10 on the season. So he's not going to get anything on the goal line. It's going to be Kelly. But, Jackson's had 5.7 targets per game over his last 4, and you talked about how many how the Raiders really forced the ball to running backs to get targeted out of the backfield. And the thing about Jackson, he's been super efficient. He's averaged 97 yards from scrimmage over his last 4 games. That's 3rd on the slate behind only Dalvin Cook and Derrick Henry. So he's being super efficient with his touches. He's averaged 16.7 touches over his last 4. I think if Pope is out, they're 1-point home favorites, a faster paced game. We do like this game. It's, they have a 27 implied total. I think Jackson's great if Pope is ultimately out of this game. Now, I believe it's a 425 kick or 405. So we might not know, and hopefully we know before kickoff. If not, it makes Jackson a little more risky. But
yeah, it'd be really nice if they rolled him out tonight or tomorrow at some point to give that clarity, because I really hate that uncertainty going into a slate. Definitely feel a little bit uneasy.
Yeah. So moving on to wide receiver, I think that there's a lot of guys up here, and it's Julio Jones, it's Keenan Allen, Steph Diggs, Tyler Lockett. I think those 4 are all absolutely awesome plays. They're all right around like the same price range, within like $500 of each other. So I think in my opinion, you pick 2 of those and you go with Jackson, or you pick 2 of those and you go with Connor and might have to punt off tight end. So we'll start with Lockett. So Lockett, it's almost like boom or bust with this guy. It's either he's going to go off or it's going to be Metcalf. I think this week sets up for a Lockett game, as he runs 58% of his routes in the slot where Tre'Davious White does not travel. Tre'Davious White will just stay on the outside, so he should clang with Metcalf for most of the game. So Lockett should be freed up in the slot. We know how bad Buffalo is to this slot. This game environment is going to be awesome. Seattle's games, they have totaled 63 points, 65, 69, 54, 53, 71, and 64. The implied total or the over on this game is 55. I think it shoots way over that. Both these offenses are amazing offenses. Tyler Lockett's averaged 10 targets per game over his last four, 0.56 weighted opportunity rating. Obviously, a lot of that was bumped up from the 20 target game. But still, he's averaging 1.1 end zone targets per game this year. That's right there with Adam Thielen on the slate, right there with Metcalf and Julio. So he's getting the money targets as well. And of course, taking on this Buffalo defense that gives up a 68% catch rate. They're 22nd DVOA. 6,800. Tyler Lockett is a total smash.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on this Lockett versus Metcalf spot. I think this is a cliche in the industry when people say, I really don't care about cornerback matchups. Tre'Davious White is one of the guys I do care about a little bit. I do think he's going to be following Metcalf around for most of the day. And we've seen this a couple weeks ago when Pat Peterson covered Metcalf. Like they came into that game with the mindset that we're going to pepper Tyler Lockett as he's going to stay away from Pat Pete. Pat Pete's not even that good anymore, but I guarantee you if they felt that way about Pat Pete, they're definitely going to feel that way against Trey White. So, and I mean, I think Lockett's probably going to be pretty chalky too. Yeah. And if Lockett puts up one of these 45-point games that we've seen him do twice this year, and if you don't have that, man, good luck.
Yeah, for sure.
And I mean, like you said, there's really only two guys. It's Metcalf, it's Lockett. Most weeks it's a coin flip, but I think with the much easier matchup for Lockett, I think, and he's $1,000 cheaper, I think he's a much better play.
Yep, for sure.
My favorite receiver play on the slate, and you might be beginning to see a trend here with what team I like this week. It's Keenan Allen. So obviously I love the Chargers this week. Keenan Allen's finally priced correctly at $7K. It was a travesty. It was absolute blasphemy that he was priced at $6,200 the last 2 weeks. So here's the thing. There's no safer player outside of maybe Devontae Adams this year at receiver than Keenan Allen. He's seen 10-plus targets in every game with Justin Herbert, with the exception of week 5 in that game against the Saints where he got hurt in the first quarter.
Yeah.
He's had a 30% target share this year, which is fourth in the league behind Devontae Adams, Jamison Crowder, and Hopkins. It looks like he's going to be shadowed probably by LaMarcus Joyner. Something to be concerned about. He's not very good. The interesting thing about Keenan Allen this year is that he's actually seeing a lot of red zone targets. He has 7 red zone targets in essentially 7 games if you take out that week 5 game where he got hurt. So that's 1 red zone target a game. I think he's as safe as it gets. And even at that $7K price tag, I mean, the volume is just unmatched really on this slate. I mean, you can probably project him for like 12 targets because he's just getting that every single week. And I mean, he's smashing with Herbert. All those concerns we had with Tyrod at the beginning of the year are just completely out the window with Herbert now.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just smashing week in, week out. It's my favorite game of the week. It's a shootout spot. The Raiders stink. I mean, I absolutely love Keenan Allen.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, 13.5 targets per game over his last 4 games with Justin Herbert where he hasn't gotten hurt. Good God. Dude's going to absolutely smash. That's the thing with these. So Lockett, Diggs, Keenan Allen, and Julio, picking the 2 out of those 4 correctly is going to determine this slate. So going to Diggs, Buffalo, just starting high level first with the Bills, is Buffalo averages 63 plays per game. Seattle opponents average 75 plays per game. So this is an up in volume spot for Buffalo. They're going to have to be throwing to keep up. If you do play Diggs and Lockett, you get some correlation there where if Seattle jumps out to a big lead from a Lockett touchdown, well, then Buffalo's going to have to fire back. And Diggs has just been getting peppered, absolutely peppered. I mean, over the last 4 games, he's averaged 11 targets per game, a 0.84 weighted opportunity, which is ridiculous. They're at home, and of course, they're taking on Seattle, who gives up a 71% catch rate. They're 30th DVOA, 7.8 yards per attempt allowed. Diggs, yeah, he's 7,400. It might feel a little bit expensive for Diggs, but he's had double-digit PPR points in every game. I think I think that Diggs is really, really solid here. It's tough parsing out between him and Keenan Allen, Julio, and Lockett, but and he is a little more expensive than those guys. So if you can get the Diggs, I think it's perfectly viable.
Yeah, I mean, he looks bust-proof so far this year. I mean, his connection with Josh Allen has, I don't want to say it's surprising because we know how good Diggs is, but typically when you look at history, receivers on the first team in a new offense typically struggle. But Diggs is absolutely smashing with Josh Allen this year.
Yeah.
And this spot, I mean, it's one of the best spots he's going to have this year in a game where they're going to be forced to throw. Russ is going to bring the heat. So Diggs is also a scary fade. I mean, you're right. Parsing through these four high price guys is going to be very critical to winning or losing money.
Yep.
Uh, he is the most expensive out of the four, but I don't think that's wrong necessarily. I mean, this game script is just perfect for him. Absolutely perfect.
Yep.
Moving on to the fourth guy in the price range is Julio Jones at 7,200. Calvin Ridley is likely out. I don't think it's been confirmed yet, but I would be shocked if he's out, if he's in there on Sunday.
Yeah, he's questionable.
Yeah. AJ Boye is also out. Not that it really matters that much because you can't cover Julio, but that just limits Denver's secondary that much more. Here's the thing about Julio. He's actually getting these red zone looks this year. He has 9 this year, 7 in the last 3 weeks, and we know how dominant Ridley's been in the red zone, not just this year, but over the course of his career. He's really been known to steal those touchdowns away from Julio, and Julio owners have been going nuts over this the last 3 years. But Matt Ryan's finally seeking out Julio in the red zone. The last 3 weeks since Julio's come back from the injury, he's had a 27% target share. That's typical Julio. That's great. Denver's actually pretty good against the run, so I think the Falcons are going to be forced to pass. Todd Gurley stinks.
Yep.
I do think Denver's going to be able to put up a fight because of how porous the Atlanta defense is. What we can hope is that it's not a game where Matt Ryan disappears. Typically, he disappears when Julio's out. Let's hope that he doesn't disappear with Ridley gone.
Mm-hmm.
So he is expensive. Again, if you're going to pay up for 2 of these guys, you're going to have to pay down elsewhere, whether it's quarterback, tight end, or running back, right? So Julio, I think, is probably my least favorite of the 4. But that being said, I still love him. You know what I mean? I just love those other 3 maybe a little bit more. Again, he's the second most expensive of the 4, so he's easier to fit than Diggs, and I think he'll probably be the lowest owned of the 4 as well. But yeah, I think it's a Mount St. Julio eruption spot potentially. I don't really. I mean, Russell Gage is. I mean, I don't know who Ridley's going to be replaced by. Is it going to be Zacchaeus? I think Hayden.
I'm going to be Christian Blake.
Christian Blake, yeah. So I don't care about that, right? Hayden Hurst is interesting, but this really should just be a Julio week. Should be.
Yeah, and in the 3 games that really missed to end the year, last year, Julio had 20, 15, and 13 targets. It could very well be an absolute eruption spot for Julio in this game. And he's also, Julio, in the last 4 games, he's averaged 124 yards per game. So he's really been playing well. His yards per route run is up again this year. He's always near the top of the league. So Julio is not dusted yet. He's a little bit older, but he is still in peak form. So if Ridley's out, Julio becomes a very, very strong play here. So moving on to, if we want to pay up for these wide receivers, we're going to have to pay down somewhere. And I think that Darnell Mooney could be a place that we could go. So he's 3,900. I know he's not really a popular name. He's a rookie. It's not a great total for Chicago. You know, they have a 20.5 implied total, and he's only averaged 5.8 targets per game. But here's the thing. His ADOT is 15.8. So he's getting these deep throws. We know that Tennessee is just putrid on defense. They give up, they're 32nd in success rate to wide receivers. That's obviously worse in the league. Darnell Mooney leads the team. He leads the Bears in air yards with 527 with Nick Foles, and that's more than Allen Robinson. Obviously, Allen Robinson gets a much higher target share, but in terms of just raw air yards, it goes to Mooney. He gets these deep shots. He gets at least 2 or 3 a game. So if he can connect on one of these balls here against this terrible Tennessee defense, I think that Mooney could be in. I mean, obviously, if he connects on one, he's 3,900. So he's going to absolutely smash that price tag. He'll probably score 13 or 14 there. And the thing about the Bears is over the last 5 weeks on early downs in the first half, so this shows intent, what they want to be doing. They're passing the ball second highest in the league, 62% of the time. So this is a team who really wants to lean towards the pass now. With Tariq Cohen being out for whatever reason, they really just want to lean towards the pass. I guess they just hate Dave Montgomery, rightfully so. He's terrible.
I hate him.
I think they're going to be losing in this game, so they're going to have to be throwing. Mooney's running routes on basically 80% of dropbacks, so he's a full-time player. He's been running ahead of Anthony Miller. So I think that Darnell Mooney gives you a lot of upside for his price at 3,900.
Yeah, I think Darnell Mooney's probably going to be pretty popular for that price point. He seems to be a clear play and a really good positive regression play as well. If Nick Foles could just hit on one of these deep balls one of these weeks, I mean, we would see an explosion from him. He was a guy who had a lot of late round hype coming into the draft. He was a sleeper pick for a lot of people. I think he went to Tulane. Is that right?
Yeah. He's a senior coming out too. So, but he ran 4.38 at the combine. So this is a burner. This is like a Ted Ginn, archetype of a player. So,
and he seems to be a pretty good player too. I mean, you were talking about intent on early downs in the first half. Maybe Matt Nagy's trying to be less of a donkey than he has been the last 2 years. I mean, hopefully. I can't stand Matt Nagy as a coach. I can't watch Bears games with the combination of Matt Nagy's play calling and watching Montgomery just be fat and slow. But I really like Darnell Mooney in that spot, and I think he's the clear play if you want to pay up at that third running back spot.
Yeah.
I'll just touch on one last guy in the mid-range. It's Deontay Johnson at 5K. I'll go over this real quick. I say this every week, the X receivers against the Cowboys, you just played it. And I think DraftKings really got this pricing wrong with the Pittsburgh wide receivers. You got Juju at 6,200, Claypool at 57, and Deontay at 5K. I think that's just blatantly wrong, personally. As bad as Dallas's defense is, they're actually giving the third fewest points to the slot, and Juju's running like 80% of his routes from the slot. Juju's never cash viable in my opinion. He doesn't really have much of a ceiling or a floor for that matter.
Yeah.
So he's overpriced, and I don't trust Claypool. Claypool's been efficient on a per target basis, but the volume has been tough to predict. Last week he had 9 targets, but the 2 weeks prior he had 1 and 4.
Yep.
And with 5,700, when you have a guy like Deontay at 5K, who Ben is just peppered with targets when he's been healthy. In the 3 games he's played full games, he's had 10, 13, and 15 targets. And I know last week he only missed like a series or 2, but he was locked up by Marcus Peters for a lot of the game. We know Marcus Peters is a pretty good corner. I think that was more of just a fluke, if anything else. I think I'm going to trust the sample size we've seen with Ben, and I think he's just massively mispriced compared to the rest of the receivers on the Steelers. So I think for that price range, he's perfectly fine.
Yeah, in his last 4 healthy games where he's played the full game through, so that's the sample is weeks 1, 2, 7, and 8. In those weeks, he's averaged 10.3 targets per game, a 0.62 weight opportunity. I mean, he is underpriced. If he's healthy, which he's off the injury report, if he can stay healthy for a full game, and that's my biggest concern with him. I played him multiple times this season, and he's gotten hurt. And it's just like, it is so tilting to watch this guy. You just see on Twitter, and it's just like, oh, Deontay Johnson getting helped off the field. You're just like, this is great. Deontay Johnson is an amazing talent. He's underpriced for his role. It's against Dallas. He's 5K. I think you play him if he's like the last guy in. I don't think he'd force it, but I think if he's the last guy in, he's fine, but the injuries with him getting hurt mid game is a real concern. He does get hurt mid game a lot, so um, that's definitely a concern for me at least.
Yeah, and I know for me personally, I'm just trying to fade this whole price range for receiver. The mid-range receivers are really ugly, as are the low-price receivers. But if it fits and you have the money, I think that he's very mispriced, and I think he's fine. What I do think is if Justin plays Deontay Johnson in his cash lineup, just fade him because he could get hurt.
Right, good. So at tight end, I think I'm going to start with my windmill play. The windmill play of the week. It's Noah Fant. Noah Fant is a stud talent. We know this. He was a first round pick last year. Out of Iowa. He's 23 years old. He's 6'4", 249. He runs 4.5. His best comparable player is George freaking Kittle. We know this guy's an absolute tank after the catch. All right, so we got that out of the way. Now, what's his volume looking like? Oh, well, over the last 4 games, he's averaged 8.0 targets per game, a 0.48 weight opportunity, which is second on the slate among tight ends, just behind Travis Kelce. He's taking on a Atlanta defense that is the worst in the NFL to opposing tight ends. They're 29th in yards per target at 8.8. They've allowed a league high 8 touchdowns to opposing tight ends. They give up the second most schedule adjusted fantasy points to tight ends. They give up 19 points per game, at 8.6 yards per attempt, at 82% catch rate. 82% catch rate to opposing tight ends. That's highest in the league.
That's coconuts.
This defense is absolutely garbage. Atlanta cannot stop anything, and they especially cannot stop tight ends. His 8 out is 8.3, so that's healthy enough, and we know what he can do after the catch. Now, the only real concern here is that it's tough to play tight ends that are on the road and have low totals. But I think Denver beats this total 23.25. I think they go over that. Like we talked about, I like Drew Lock. And Alberto is running a decent amount of routes, but over the last couple games, as Fant is starting to get back into the offense and be healthy, Fant's routes have gone from 16 to 24 to 27, and Alberto, his routes have gone from 12 to 16 and then back down to 14. So Fant, he's starting to get acclimated back into the offense off that ankle injury. I think he's starting to get healthy. 4,600 against Atlanta. This is my windmill play. I'll most likely have him in cash. No offense, an absolute monster.
First off, how insane is it that Iowa had Kittle, Fant, and Hawkinson all at the same time?
Oh,
You
no.
know what that is? But yeah, I mean, Fant's fine. This just feels like a week where I get the Twitter notification. Noah Fant, 70-yard receiving touchdown. And then it's just pants off intercourse, right? So
this is pants off.
Noah Fant's just amazing, dude. And this is just a great spot for him. This is probably the best. I mean, I feel like I say this all the time, but this is probably the best spot that he and Drew Lock are going to see this year.
Yeah. It's a cheap stack too. That's the thing. Lock's 5,200, Fant's 4,600. That's cheap as hell for a stack.
Absolutely, and it helps you get in those high-priced receivers and running backs, right? So I think he's absolutely fine. I typically don't like to pay up for tight end, but I mean, he's not that expensive in terms of tight end. He's a great talent. We know that. Elite athlete. He showed burst. He was one of my favorite sleeper tight ends coming into the year. He's finally healthy. So I think it's a great spot. And I don't know how much ownership he's going to have either. So I think he's fine. One of the guys I like this week, again, another Charger, right? Hunter Henry at 4K. Now, I typically punt tight end, but at 4K, Hunter Henry is pretty cheap. I think he's pretty mispriced. Now, granted, he hasn't been very good the last few weeks, but over the last month, the Raiders are giving up the third most points to tight ends, 17.5 points a game. Hunter Henry's had an 18.5% target share. That's pretty good at the tight end position. Again, in a game where we think it has shootout potential, in a game where Herbert has been just eating every week. Now, I think that there's a good bit of positive regression coming Hunter Henry's way. He's had 40 yards or less in each of his last 4 games, and he only has 1 touchdown this year which suggests regression because Hunter Henry's always been pretty good in the end zone or in the red zone. Now that could just be a Phillip Rivers tendency kind of thing that we've seen the last couple of years, and maybe Herbert doesn't look to his tight ends as much. But we've already seen Donald Parham or whatever this guy's name is. He's caught 2 touchdowns this year, and Hunter Henry only has one on the whole season, right?
Don't besmirch Donald Parham.
Yeah,
Donald Parham was an absolute beast in the XFL.
The point is, Herbert's throwing a lot of touchdowns to irrelevant guys, right? Like Jalen Guyton is scoring 70-yard touchdowns every other week. I mean, so Hunter Henry is relatively cheap for the position. I think the game environment's cheap. It's a good matchup. He's had 40 yards or less in each of his last 4 games, despite his pretty good target share at the position. So I think this is a get-right spot for him at a cheap price tag. Again, that's a little bit of value that helps. Now, the only other thing I would say about tight end is if you are looking to punt, I think it's Will Disley from the Seahawks or Alberto from the Broncos. Neither one of them are really getting that many targets. Alberto is losing snaps every week with Noah Fant getting more and more healthy. And then Will Disley, he's running not a lot of routes, but he's closing the gap a little bit with Greg Olsen, I believe.
Yeah.
I do like Greg Olsen better than Will Disley at 3,100. He's running a lot of routes, but if you really want to punt, Disley's 27, Alberto is 28. And again, I say this every week, but if you punt the tight end position, the opportunity cost is so low that if you fill your lineup with the right higher price guys, it's not going to make a difference.
Yep.
Your higher price guys don't bust. I don't think you're going to get killed by $2,800 tight end, even if he gets you 0. And here's the thing: if he gets 1 target like Alberto did last week, 1 reception for a touchdown, that's amazing. Like that is absolutely what you're looking for. Even a guy like Anthony Ferkster, I think, is absolutely fine. So, yeah, that's all I've got on tight end.
Yeah, so this week we mentioned a lot of really high-priced guys. So you're going to have to make some reservations on who you're going to plant your flag on between Keenan Allen, Lockett, Julio, and Diggs, or Metcalf if you want to go all the way up. I mean, at running back, you're going to have to plant your flag on Dalvin Cook, Edmonds, James Conner. You're not going to be able to play all 3 most likely unless you punt off tight end. So you're going to have to kind of make decisions and stick with them and be like, look, I'm not going to play these guys and just have to deal with it. If you're a single entry cash player like us, I mean, if you play multiple cash lineups, I mean, I don't know how many condoms you wear. So we're definitely not doing that. If you split cash action, that's just
a little bit of split late swap.
Yeah, you do you, but I am not the kind of person that will split cash action. I play one lineup on Draftkings every week, and
I like to make money.
And yeah, if you split action, it's a losing proposition most weeks. So have conviction in your plays and go out there and see what happens. Yeah, so that's going to do it for the week 9 DraftKings breakdown for the PrintFest DFS podcast. We're going to be back on Monday night breaking down our cash lineups, and hopefully we printed, hopefully you printed, and hopefully we'll have a good podcast on Monday night. Until then, good luck, everybody.